Is this not why you are here?
Greetings, everyone watching live on YouTube and everyone tuning in after the fact. This is Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. Shout out to the faithful and salute to the patrons. I am here to bring you all my live review of Dr. Sleep. Yeah, Dr. Sleep. I went out to the theater, saw this yesterday, was interested in it once I saw the trailer and whatnot. So yeah, went ahead, checked it out, gave it a day, let my thoughts kind of, simmer, kind of marinate. And so I'm going to give you all pretty much my review of it, give you all my thoughts, opinions, this, that, and the third. Now, as I've done previously with my movie reviews, especially with the new releases, first portion of this review is going to be spoiler-free. Second part will be spoiler-filled, but I only really have a couple of brief spoilers to talk about. All right, so let's get on into it. Now, for those of you all who don't know, Dr. Sleep, this is the 2019 American horror film that was written, directed, and edited by Mike Flanagan. This is an adaptation of the 2013 novel by Stephen King, which is a sequel to his 1977 novel, The Shining. Now, what's pretty cool about Dr. Sleep, though, with the film adaptation, this is actually an adaptation. Oh, I'm sorry. While it's an adaptation of the book, it's actually a sequel to the 1980 Shining film by Stanley Kubrick, which I thought was kind of a nifty idea. It makes a lot of sense, though, because that original Shining film, it's legendary. It's iconic. It's one of the greatest American films ever made. It's one of Stanley Kubrick's best films. And because it's such a piece of American cinema history, but also pop culture history, it kind of makes sense that if you were going to go ahead and adapt the sequel of that story, it makes sense that the adaptation would be the sequel to that specific film. Because for any of you all who know, there are some key differences between Kubrick, Shining, and Stephen King's original novel. So the fact that they decided to go ahead and make the film adaptation of Dr. Sleep a sequel to the film, as opposed to, okay, let's just go ahead and adapt it straight and be a straight up sequel to the novel, I thought was actually a pretty good idea, all things considered. But yeah, it was a good choice because we know that there has been this recent sort of like surge to go back and sort of adapt King more faithfully. That's what the two It movies were about doing more faithful adaptations. But I'm actually glad they kind of decided to, stay within the continuity of Kubrick's film. So brief synopsis of what the film is about. So Dr. Sleep takes place, what is that? 40 years. So Dr. Sleep takes place almost 40 years after the events of Kubrick's The Shining, because we finally get some timestamps and we pretty much date everything as it was in real time, right? So, but it takes place, I think it takes place in 2011. And we are picking up with Danny. Man, I messed up this synopsis because my brain is running right now. Anywho, so the synopsis of the film is that this takes place a few decades after the events of The Shining. We see the immediate aftermath of it at film's opening with Danny, still as a kid, trying to make sense about what happened over at the Overlook Hotel. Also trying to make sense of what's going to happen with his life now, because essentially he's kind of stuck with this power. He's stuck with his shine, if you will. And so we get a little brief exposition about, what it is that Danny actually has to do in order to gain control of his power. And then we straight time skip into the future where Danny is now grown man struggling with alcoholism, struggling with drug abuse. Because he's still trying to cope with the childhood trauma from what happened to him over at the Overlook Hotel. But Danny begins his journey of sort of recovery, and he finds a new purpose in pretty much adopting this role that's been placed on him, the title of Dr. Sleep. Essentially what happens is Danny, after he moves away to a small town, starts working on his recovery over the course of 8 years. What he does is he ends up becoming a orderly at a retirement home at a hospice. It's a hospice. He becomes an orderly at a hospice, and what he does is he learns how to use his shining to assist elderly people with coping with their passing. So it's not like assisted suicide or anything like that. He's not actually killing anyone. But what happens is he's able to pick up on when that person's time has come. And so he kind of sits with them and consoles them and guides them through until they pass, right? And so he ends up getting nicknamed Dr. Sleep. That's where the title of the film and the title of the book comes from. But while this is happening, we get introduced to a group of characters known as the True Knot, which are a group of beings who also possess the Shining, but given their specific abilities, what they're able to do, they have actually learned how to essentially steal the Shining from other people and use it to prolong their own life. Essentially, they're a group of immortals, but they can still. What's kind of cool about it is they do that whole bit where it's like they can still die and they can still be killed, but so long as they're able to, retain some type of like health, right? Some type of good health. And so long as they're able to continue to feed on the shining of other people, they can live for as long as they keep that up. Well, what they do is they end up discovering this girl named Abra, who lives off on the East Coast. And they find out that she is sort of like a shining prodigy, almost like how Danny was when he was young. But she is like very, very powerful. And because of that, she ends up becoming the target of this group. So Abra reaches out, she uses her shining, she reaches out to Danny, and she pretty much enlists him in the attempt to sort of thwart this maniacal group. And essentially, that is the basis of the synopsis of the film. Danny now being in the position that he's in, now that he's older, now that he's more experienced, and now that he has found another young person who was once in his position, takes up a mentor role to try and help this young girl. So that's pretty much the synopsis of Dr. Sleep in a nutshell without giving away too many spoilers and anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by giving my overall thoughts. Then I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about the story, the writing, the dialogue, the characters, this, that, and the other. So my overall thoughts on the film was I thought it was a good film. I liked it. But prior to seeing the film, I did read some reviews and some comments that were kind of mixed reception. From what I can gather, it seems like the majority of critics I ran across who didn't have favorable reviews for it, usually it was I want to be fair when I say this, but from what I gather, most of those critics were either expecting a more faithful adaptation of the novel, or they were expecting they had like really high expectations because they were expecting a film that would, I guess you could argue, would do a proper homage to Kubrick. Because let's be real about this. You're not going to make a film better than The Shining, right? You're not going to outdo Kubrick. That's just not going to happen. So at best, you can do a spiritual successor. And I get the sense that those critics were expecting, if you're not going to just do a straight up like faithful adaptation of the book, the film has to at least be a spiritual successor to Kubrick's Shining, right? And and this film doesn't accomplish either. I think it sits somewhere in the middle. And that's why I say I don't think it satisfied those critics in question. That's why I think it got the reception it did. But what I will say about this is, number one, the film is competent. It doesn't convolute itself. It maintains its internal logic. What happens in the film makes sense based upon the rules we are given about this world. So in that regard, you have to at least give the film that credit, right? It doesn't convolute itself and it doesn't contradict itself. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of character motivations, in terms of plot, in terms of story progression, pace. Well, okay, real quick on pacing. The film does run a little long. That much is true. There, it's kind of weird. There's sort of like 2 climax in the movie. Okay, pacing issue. Fine. Valid point. Valid criticism. But outside of that, like all the other mechanics of the film, I think hold up. So that's why I said, I think the film is good. I think it's solid. It's not a great film, no. And even, you know what's funny? The fact that it is considered a horror movie, I kind of chuckled at, because the film isn't particularly scary, but it is in the horror genre, right? Though I will say this, while the film is not particularly scary, there is one particular scene in this film that is a little hard to watch. Yeah, it's a little rough. So don't take your kids, obviously. And I will say this, if you are a parent, you have been warned, because it is a little rough. But I will give it this. It is rough, but the film, I don't find the film to actually be grotesque. So I'll also give it that credit. Like it's not gruesome and it's not gory. It's horror, but it's a stylized horror. There is a class to the for lack of a better term, the carnography. There is it's not crude, and I appreciate that. The violence isn't crude. It's not too graphic. It's classy in my opinion. And I think that works in the film's favor. Okay. Let me see. So, all right. So yeah, let me before I get into the visuals, full-blown discussion about the visuals, let me get back to the story. So like I said, internal logic makes sense. It doesn't contradict itself. It's not it's coherent. It's competent. All of that works. Dialogue, I think, works pretty well. Yeah, I think all of that. I think all of it holds up. I will say this though, because I know a lot of people are going to talk about this, especially when you compare this to the book. Because the big departure, from what I gather, well, actually, no, there's a couple of departures from the book. Now, for the record, I have not read the book, but I read what happens in the book. So I know about the differences between this film and the book. Okay, so yeah, they do depart from the book about halfway through the movie or so. What I will say about this, though, let's talk about the ending real quick. Personally, I would have preferred that they adapt the ending from the book, because to me, it's a little bit more interesting. But if you are going to make this a sequel to Kubrick Shining, the ending makes sense the way they do it. It makes sense the way they do it. And then, of course, remember, this is cinema. This isn't literary. So we're talking about a visual medium. It makes sense that they made the changes to the ending in the movie that they did, because we are telling a visual story as much as a literary one. There are visual cues. There is the what we do with the setting, what we do with some of the material in that ending. Some of that has to be done in order to conclude Danny's character arc. So that being said, like, it makes sense why the changes were made to the ending that were made. It makes sense to me. All right. So real briefly, let me go ahead and let's talk about the characters. And in that same vein, we'll also talk about the acting, right? So first off, let's talk about Danny. Let's talk about Ewan McGregor. I really enjoyed Danny in the film. Like I said, what happens with Danny all seems to make sense. The way in which his character arc progresses, I think all made sense. And the way where we leave him by the end of the movie, I think it all makes sense. It is a tad bit tragic because there is, what the film does is the film does a good job at reinforcing that notion of The Shining being a curse, right? It's as much a gift as it is a curse, and you can't have one without the other. And that is Danny's relationship with his abilities in this film. So on the one hand, he does use it to find purpose and meaning, and he is able to do positive things with it. But at the other hand, there is a burden that comes with that ability. And that burden comes with it a destiny that can't really be avoided. At best, you can only rise to meet it, but you're not going to outrun this thing. What's the line from Avengers Infinity War? Deny it, run from it, but at the end, destiny comes all the same. That's sort of the challenge Danny faces in this film. And I think what they do with his character, I think it works. Me personally, I didn't like what happened with Danny by story's end. But it does make sense. Just because I personally don't like it doesn't mean that it doesn't work within the confines of the piece. It does work. Ewan McGregor, I think, brings it. I think he's phenomenal. He does a great job, as is expected. His performance wasn't for me. That wasn't like the standout. That wasn't the star-studded performance, because he did exactly what I knew and I expected from him. The person I want to talk about right now is Rebecca Ferguson as Rosie the Hat. She's the breakout performance. She is incredible in this movie. She's phenomenal. Her acting is on point. The character, just the character of Rosie the Hat herself, she is menacing. She is, oh my God. Okay, where do we go? So she is smart. She is cunning, quick as a whip, menacing as hell. All those qualities make for a really good villain. Yeah. And the other thing I like about Ferguson's performance, also, she's natural, right? It does not feel like she is playing a character. It feels like one of those roles, kind of like with once again, go back to Marvel for a bit, like Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, right? It's a natural role. It doesn't feel like that actor is acting. They just do, right? Rebecca Ferguson has that type of performance in this film. It feels as though she's just natural with it. She's charismatic, and all of that comes out in her performance. And I think they do a really good job at that. If I had one criticism about what the film does with Rosie the Hat, it's so really, really, really small, brief spoiler. There is a point in time where we do have to leave her. She's kind of taken off the board for a while before she comes back into play. It is one criticism I have. I do have a criticism about that. But the manner in which it happens, once again, it makes sense. It makes sense why that would occur the way it occurred in the movie, given what it is, the event that takes place that takes her off the board for that period of time. It kind of makes sense. And what I actually think it does is it does a really good job at contributing to the threat factor in the movie, right? The threat level, and then of course the stakes level, because we are dealing with, supernatural beings, superpowered beings. And when they start coming into contact with each other and finding out, because we, the audience, are finding out right along with the characters how their abilities affect one another, especially once that power scale gets established, because there is a power scale in this movie. Once that gets established and we see what that actually looks like, it all makes sense. But once again, like I said, Rebecca Ferguson, Rosie the Hat, breakthrough performance in the film. She's phenomenal. That's going to bring me to the debut, actually, the motion picture debut of Kyliegh Curran as Abra. So real brief. Okay, first off, Abra as a character. All right, how do I put this? I think for her role in this story, she is written adequately. I like, number one, I do like that she's older, right? So we're not dealing with a young child like, you know, Danny in The Shining, right? She's much old because I think because what she is 13. Five plus eight. She's 13. Yeah. So Abra is 13. When she, you know, becomes involved in the main story. So yeah, so like the fact that she's older, I think contributes itself well to the story, to the plot, and what have you. I like how competent she is. She's not an idiot, so thank God for that, because she doesn't play the silly kid or the dumb kid or even the dumb luck kid. No, she's very competent. If there is her character flaw, I wish we would have did a little bit more with this, but the consequences that happen because of it, I think, prove the point. If anything, her main character flaw is her confidence. Because she doesn't start to fail until later in the film. And that's when, once again, the threat level, right? That's when things get more real for her. Because Abby enters the story because she's taken it upon herself to try and help someone else, right? It's because she doesn't become the target until she is made aware of another victim. So right then and there, she displays agency, right? She displays agency because she takes it upon herself to get involved. And it's not until after that that she becomes the target. So there, like I said, there's that competency, there's that confidence there. But because she is able to do what she does early on in the film, when the shit does hit the fan and she starts to fail, that hubris comes into play. And I think that's a good flaw for her. And I like that she doesn't get shit on for it. It's sort of just like the way it's played out in the film is more so of you just entered this game and you don't know the people you're playing with. These are people who have been playing this game a very long time. So it's not that she's like, oh, you're just a stupid, silly kid. It's more of you've just come into your power and you don't know how to use it. Let us show you. Bam, right? So so all in all, like Abra as a character, I think is done well. Or let me put it like this, adequately enough. And her acting, I think, is adequately enough. Is it as good as like the kids from It Chapter 2? No. But the material those kids was given is a lot different than what Kyliegh Curran is given. So keep that comparison I just drew, take that with a grain of salt. It's not as good as like the kids from It Chapter 1 or, you know, the kids from Stranger Things. Not a strong performance, but still adequately enough. I will say this, though, and I will give Kyliegh Curran her credits because this was her sort of like shining moment, especially with her capacity as an actress, especially as a young actress. Her best scene in the movie is a scene where Abra isn't herself. So Kyliegh Curran is playing out of character. Her ability, and it's really good, but her ability to play Abra, and then in this one specific scene I'm talking about, and I'm not going to get into too much detail because it would be spoiler, right? She switches from being Abra to immediately being another character. That actress's ability to do that, really good. And like I say, it's her best scene in the movie. It's really, really good. I didn't know the kid had chops like that, so I give credit where credit is due. She did a pretty good job at that. Okay. And so finally, the final performance I'll talk about just very briefly is my man, Cliff Curtis. He has a main supporting role in this film. Cliff Curtis, he's a great actor, great character actor. Been in Hollywood a very long time now. He brought it though. I didn't even know he was in this movie, but as soon as he popped up, I'm like, oh man, Cliff, he's going to do a good job, and he does do a good job. Actually, you know what? Let me take that back. He did an even better job than I thought he would do, because I wasn't sure what all we would get to see done with his character. But where they take his character, especially once he gets involved in the main conflict, yeah, there was some stuff I wasn't expecting, and I thought he did a pretty good job at that. So kudos for that. All right, so now I'm done talking about the characters, done talking about the acting and story and all that jazz. Let's talk about the visuals. Because, like I said, this film is a sequel to Kubrick's Shining, and because of that, there are a lot of visual cues, and there's a lot of things we do with setting, and there's a lot of things we do essentially with like turning back the clock. What's interesting about this, we don't use de-aging effects. Instead, what Mike Flanagan decided to do with this film was he recast. So he recast an actor to play young Danny, which kind of makes sense because Danny was so young during that film. But like, we recast the mom, and some other characters too. But yeah, so there are no like de-aging effects, and so that's number one. But then the other thing too is they did sort of remake the Overlook Hotel, and they made it look exactly how it looked in Kubrick's film. That I thought was amazing. It took me a while to figure out that we weren't looking at footage from the original movie, because at first that's what it looked like. It looked like remastered footage from the original movie. No, it's not. That they reshot those scenes, and I was like, man, that was some really good work. So kudos to them for that. I would also say that the special effects are actually pretty good in this too. Especially what we do with the True Knot, and when the scenes in which they use their powers, and when we get to see how their powers and like the effects that it has on them, that was actually some pretty cool stuff. I liked it. And you know what's funny about that? As much of the special effects that we have in this film, most of the work that I want to say damn near all the work that's done with the actors is actually practical. Like, we don't do like CGI actors, right? Like, even when we do like, like scenes where a character is like is either hovering, or is like levitating, or is like flying, or anything like that, it's still the actual actor. And there might be only like what, and actually, you know what? There's a scene with Abra that looks like it could be CG, but honestly, I'm thinking they might have just sped, like it's just they just sped up the frames. They just sped up the camera to make it look like she was moving at high speed, but I still think that was practically shot. So yeah, like we don't even do CG like people. So the fact that there are like the practical effects in it too, I think lends itself really well to the movie too. So all those things I think work pretty damn well. Let's talk about the audio. We gotta talk about audio, because audio is a thing in this one. When you're talking about trying to recreate like the atmosphere and the feel of that original Shining movie and incorporating that into this one so that we know we're in that same world, audio matters too. It matters just as much as the visual. And what we do with that heartbeat effect, early in the movie, it really felt sort of gimmicky. But then when it starts to tie in with what we're going to see on screen, because we get that like throughout the whole first half of that movie. But when that heartbeat starts picking up and that pace starts picking up with what's going on film, then it makes a lot more sense. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I see what y'all doing with that. That motif, it makes sense by once the action starts to pick up. The other thing too is the sound mixing. With when we really start doing a lot of heavy special effect work, all of that worked pretty well too. Yeah, and then of course the music is really good. I dug some of the song choices because we're kind of all over the place in terms of some of the music choices in the film. Like, there's the old, like, 50s music, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. It's more like 20s and 30s music. The music that would have been heard in the Overlook Hotel in the original film, that old, like, record player, some of that old jazz, some of that old swing type stuff. Some of that is in here because once again, we're homaging back to that, right? But then we got like, there's some Sinatra in here. There's like some 80s music in here. So yeah, it's a a little amalgam of different music choices. But of course, that's because once again, we're following Danny throughout his life now. So we're all over the place in terms of time periods in this movie. We're in what was it? We open back in the We open back in the 80s. And then I think at some point we jump to the 90s, but then we're like in the early 2000s, and then we jump to present day. So we're a little bit, but yeah, the music reflects that to remind us that this is happening in our world. Except for one big thing that it's a change that they make from the book in the movie. Part of me is like, why wasn't that included in there? That would have been really important, but I guess it kind of throws off the time of it all. I don't know. Well, yeah, it would have to throw off the time, right? That's why it's not included in the movie. It has to do with 9/11. It's in the book. It's not in the movie. But yeah, if they would have put that in the movie, it would have threw off the timeline. So yeah, okay, that's why they didn't do it. Anywho, all right. So yeah. So all in all, I thought it was a good film. I thought it was a solid film. I think once again, like I said, it's not Kubrick. You're not going to out Kubrick. No one has managed to out Kubrick. That's why he's Stanley freaking Kubrick. But if you are a fan of that movie, I mean, I think it's a good sequel. I really do. I think it's a good sequel. I didn't have too many issues with it, except for two things that I'm going to talk about in that spoiler portion. So once again, this is going to conclude the non-spoiler portion of this review. We're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into spoiler territory right now. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's do that. All right. So let's talk about some spoilers. I'm only going to talk about two because there were only two that really bugged me. The biggest one, and it's my biggest criticism about the film, y'all couldn't get Jack Nicholson to come back for this. Earlier in the review, when I talked about how Flanagan went ahead and he recreated everything from Kubrick's Shining, right? The sets, we recasted, we reshot, effects and stuff like that. Like they recreated the material from that movie, right? But with that being said, we also recast Jack. I really wish they would have brought Jack Nicholson back for that. Jack Torrance appears in the movie in the end. And for the record, for anybody who is familiar with the book, it is different than the way it's done in the book. It's different than how it's done in the book. But if Jack Torrance is going to make an appearance in that movie, the fact that we had to wait until the end, I was really, really hoping that they were going to recast Jack Nicholson and use de-aging effects on him. And the fact that when we first get to Jack, he's shot from one side. You don't see his full face until the end of the scene. I was really hoping, like, I knew it was a different actor, right? But I was really hoping by the time, because he's only shot from one side, and then we cut away, and then we cut back. I was really hoping by the time we cut back, it would have been Jack Nicholson, de-aged, especially since, once again, Jack Torrance is only there because of because we're at the Overlook Hotel, and because Danny is using his power. It's mental. Jack is not physically there. So if he's not physically there, it's not going to be that jarring that it's a CG effect that we're seeing. But that's not what we got. That's not what we got. We got a recasting of the character. And the actor, I think, does a good enough job, but he doesn't get to do enough. And from what I heard from what I've read about what occurs in the book, Jack has more of a role. It's not just a cameo. Like it in the book, it's more. It's a little bit bigger, right? But once again, his place in the film is done the way it is because we are once again trying to conclude Danny's character arc. So it kind of makes sense that that's the extent of his role, because by that point in time, all we're dealing with is the atonement with the father, right? That's the only point. That's the only purpose that scene plays. That's the only role that scene fulfills, is that this is the final face-to-face confrontation / conversation with the son to the father. The whole sins of the atonement with the father, the sins of the father, all of the things that's been haunting Danny. And what we do with the questions of him being a man, and how him learning, him making sense of what that means for him, how that has contributed to his understanding of who his father was. Like, that's the only purpose for that scene. So, okay, fine, what have you, done. All right, second spoiler I want to talk about, and this is the thing that kind of gave me had me leaving the theater with a bitter taste, and that is that we killed Danny by the end. Personally, I didn't care for it. It makes sense within the story. Once again, that's what I talked about earlier when I mentioned The Shining being, both a gift and a curse simultaneously. Can't have one without the other. Kind of makes sense. I still didn't like it. I kind of wish Danny had lived. Oh, and for the record, shocker, in the book he does. Danny lives in the end of the book. He lives in the book, but he doesn't live in the movie. I kind of roll my eyes about that because part of me kind of knows why that is. Part of me suspects other reasons why that is, but I don't want to get too far off. I don't want to go down the beaten path. I don't want to get too far off topic with this review. But let me put it to you like this. There is a trend that's been going on in Hollywood recently, particularly with well-established or previously established male characters in Hollywood franchises, and the manner in which we have been writing these characters out and turning the franchise over to a new female lead. It's getting old, and I'm kind of tired of it. So I'm not saying that was the intention with this film, but it's still, the result was still the same, regardless if that was if that was an intention with the film or not. It still is playing into that same gimmick. So yeah, didn't really care for that. And dude, honestly and truly, those were my only real two criticisms about the. Oh, and like I said, the pacing issue, right? But that's it. Those were only the real big two things, and both of which I think, I'll be honest with you guys, I think it's just kind of taste issue with me. Like I don't think the film is worse because of any of those things. It's just a taste issue for me. I would have loved to see Jack Nicholson come back for that cameo, and I wish Danny would have lived. But anywho, so we are coming up on 40 minutes now. By and large, that's pretty much going to wrap up my review. Like I said, solid movie. I thought it was good. Like I said, if nothing else, it is really Rebecca Ferguson, her performance, it's worth checking out just for that. But that, and like I said, what we do with the visuals in this movie is really, really cool. It's really, really good. So like I said, if you're a fan of The Shining, I think it's worth checking out. Yeah, not a bad way to spend an afternoon. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, pretty cool film. So, real quick, looks like I only have two questions in the comments. I will answer these really quick. Favorite movies based on a Stephen King novel. So my favorite movies based on a Stephen King novel: Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, Secret Window. Yeah, I actually like Secret Window. I'm trying to think of another one because I mean, I like most Stephen King, I like most Stephen King stories. I like most Stephen King movies. But I'm not as big of a fan of some of the ones that like are the most popular. So like I'm not the biggest Carrie fan. I'm not the biggest well, actually I like Christine a lot better than most people I know. But it's not one of my favorites, right? I did, you know what? I did. Well, what was it? Sleepwalkers, the ones with the cat people. I like that one a lot as a kid. That was probably my favorite one when I was a kid. I really, really liked that. Because I just, because like werecats and cat people, like I thought that was a cool concept. Because we see werewolves done so much, and I'm like, oh snap, it's cat people. Like I thought it was really cool. I really, really liked it. But like I said, like in terms of like my favorite ones, once again, Shawshank, Green Mile. Funny, the two prison movies are in there, right? Shawshank, yeah, I know, right? But yeah, Shawshank, Green Mile, Secret Window. I mean, like I said, I like It fine. I do think It Chapter 1 was really, really good. I didn't see the Pet Cemetery remake. I didn't see that. I still have not seen the Chloe Grace Moretz Carrie. Still haven't seen that. Dude, I'm about to get so much shit for this. The Rage Carrie 2. When did that come back? When did it came out? 2001, I think. The direct-to-video sequel to Carrie. I actually dug that movie. I dug that movie a lot. I used to watch that a lot back in the day. I dug that movie. Yeah, I know. Tar and feather me. Bring on the tomatoes and the cabbages. I know. I actually dug that movie. But yeah, so I would probably say my favorite movie based off of this, probably Shawshank Redemption. Yeah. Okay. Yes, to Jean Powers. That's what I meant by that comment. And no, it's not just Luke Skywalker and John Connor. We did it with Rambo. We're doing it with Hawkeye. We did it with, who's another character we did it with? There's another one recently we just did that with. Dang, it's gonna come to me later. But yeah, that's kind of the trend now. So, yeah. Anywho, so all right, so that is going to end up concluding this review for me. I want to thank everybody for watching live. Thank everybody for watching after the fact. And like I said, by all means, go out, check this film out. If you like this, and there goes my timer. Real quick. All right, so going ahead, wrapping this up. Once again, if you like this review, please feel free, give it a like, thumb it up, share it, share the link, share the URL link, social media, share it with your friends, anybody you think would get a kick out of it. You know, any and all sharing, you know, word of mouth, all that type of jazz. Greatly appreciated. If you prefer to support the channel, if you want to support the channel financially, so PayPal, the link to my PayPal is in the description box, but I have, you know, been encouraging, always recommend people check out the OAW Patreon page and select one of the tiers because over there on the OAW Patreon, you can request topics for videos, reviews, all that type of jazz. You also get access to Patreon exclusive content that you won't be able to get on the OAW YouTube channel. So yeah, if you want to support the channel financially, like I said, visit patreon.com/OAW, or you can go ahead and you can donate to me via Patreon. PayPal. That link is in the description box. But if you want to support the channel and you can't do it financially, by all means, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that. So with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I am signing off, and until next time, peace.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?